Thank you for coming back, everybody, for more Next Up. I'm Mark Halperin, editor-in-chief of Two Way. Very glad to have you here and very excited about our conversation today. One of my close friends, Joe Scarborough, and I, who have known each other a long time and talk regularly, people who work in politics and in media, are regularly surrounded by people in their lives who they talk to on a regular basis. Joe and I talk and communicate quite a bit, and we talk about sports, we talk about music, we talk about our families, we talk about all sorts of stuff. But one topic that we've talked about now for 7 or 8 years is Joe Biden and the status of his mental acuity. And we have honest conversations about it. We're not dogmatic. We don't say it's weekend at Bernie's and Barack Obama was secretly running the government. And we don't say that everything's fine with Joe Biden. What we do is agree or disagree by following the data. And I'm super excited for you to be able to hear the kind of conversation that Joe and I have regularly. Normally it's not on video and audio recorded. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you, looking forward for you to hear the kind of conversation Joe and I have had. And it's on a topic that is very timely right now because, of course, although Donald Trump is president, Joe Biden this week, again, is very much in the news. I'll say, again, for Democrats and the media to have the credibility to hold Donald Trump accountable, there has to be a reckoning about what's happened. And the through line is the question of how Joe Biden has been covered. I will continue to aggressively cover Donald Trump and his administration, and I'll continue to say what is obviously the case, which is Donald Trump frequently does not tell the truth. I think the reason why the table needs to be set here is because I think one of the biggest mistakes, maybe the biggest through line of all for the way Bidens have been covered, is the Bidens, it is regularly said, are a good family. They're decent people. And I'm not here to tell you they're worse than the Trumps or worse than Nixon, but I'm here to tell you that the mythology that the Bidens are good people who don't lie is not borne out by the facts, and that's increasingly front and center in sharp relief this week. We know that they didn't tell the truth about Biden Inc. We know that. We know the president in the debate in 2020 against Donald Trump did not tell the truth when asked about Hunter's business. I'm not here to sit in moral judgment of them. I'm not here again to tell you that Joe Biden is a bigger liar by some metrics than Donald Trump. What I am here to tell you, again, is this has been a horrible mistake on the part of the media to treat the Bidens like they walk on water. 4 strands right now put in sharp relief this issue. First, the release last Friday of the audio tape of Joe Biden's conversations with Special Counsel Hur regarding the issue of whether he improperly took classified material out of the White House. That audio was blocked from release by the Biden White House. They made up reasons why they blocked it, but the reason that they blocked it was because it would have been politically devastating had it been released when he was still trying to run for president. The second strand is all these questions about his mental acuity tied to the new book out today by Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, related to the degree to which Joe Biden declined and the degree to which people around Joe Biden covered it up. Now, I've said before, I don't think the book actually delivers on the question of who covered up what. They hint at it, but I don't think they fully deliver on it. But there's no doubt that they are saying belatedly, in the case of Jake Tapper, less belatedly in the case of Alex Thompson, what was obvious to all, and I'll talk about that. Then we've got the diagnosis announced conveniently by the Bidens. Feel horrible for the president and his family to go through another case of cancer after they lost Beau to cancer. But the question of the timing, which even Biden loyalists have said to me, doesn't make sense. To say that the president was suddenly diagnosed on Friday and announced halfway through the release from the time that her tapes were released until the release of the book. So we'll talk about that. The last strand is how Democrats and the media are grappling with their role in trying to stop Donald Trump from getting elected president by covering up and refusing to report honestly on Joe Biden's decline. So we're going to talk about all that. I'll talk about that with Joe, but I want to set the table by talking again about some of my experiences and how I have thought about Joe Biden's mental decline over the course of covering him. I've known him for a long time. Our father, he was good friends with my father, colleagues with my father. I covered his presidential campaign in 2008. Spent a lot of time around him when he was a senator, and then some time around him when he was vice president, and had a pretty good relationship with his son Beau. Spent some time with him. The Bidens are big liars. You know, you can deny it. You can say, oh, they're such good people. But the press has assumed for years that the Bidens were somehow different, that Joe Biden was a good man, in the words of George W. Bush. And again, you just look at the way they covered up Biden Inc., the way the way they dealt with the cover-up of his mental decline. I'm not saying they're worse than others, but I'm saying the press has made a mistake in covering them like they're the same. I've talked here and elsewhere before about how I saw Joe Biden at a book event in 2017 on the island of Nantucket, where he spoke to several hundred people with a friendly interviewer, and he was exactly the way he was later in his presidency, glassy-eyed, trailing off thoughts, losing the train of thought of the conversation, speaking kind of too long and off topic. And I said after that event, again, I've told you this before, thank goodness he's out of public life. Thank goodness he'll never have to run for anything again. And yet, of course, he did. He ran for president twice after that. In 2021, after he got elected president, early in his administration, he gave a press conference. And during the press conference, I had an email exchange with a prominent Democrat, someone who'd served in senior positions in the Democratic Party, about what was going on in the press conference. And the other person initiated the email exchange, and he said, "Isn't it great to have a president who's so on top of it, who can speak so fluidly after Donald Trump?" And there's no doubt, if you watch the whole press conference in 21 in the spring, there's no doubt that Joe Biden looks much more with it than he would look just a few years later in the presidency. But I want to show you a portion of this press conference. This is 102. Watch Joe Biden reading.
And if we leave, we're going to do so in a safe and orderly way. We're in consultation, I say, with our allies and partners and how to proceed. And Secretary Blinken is meeting in Brussels this week with our NATO allies, particularly those who have forces there. And General Austin is just met with Kayani, and I'm waiting for the briefing on that. He is the leader, quote, in Afghanistan and Kabul. And there's a UN-led process that's beginning shortly on how to mechanically get people, how to end this war. But it is not my intention to stay there for a long time.
Now, presidents use notes, presidents use teleprompter, but unlike the person I was emailing with, who was so favorably disposed towards Biden's performance, I was struck by the fact that he was reading a script on a topic that he had worked on for decades. And so I'm going to read to you the parts of the email that I wrote to this person in our exchange back and forth, because it gives you into a window of how I saw Joe Biden and his presidency and his mental acuity in March of 2021. I'm reading my own email here. "His mental decline is pronounced, troubling, and in danger of accelerating in a hurry. It is a tough situation for his family and the country, but his widespread attempt to deny that it exists freaks some of us out. When he has naps and long overnight sleep and notes, he can make or fake his way through meetings and interviews, which is great. It means that he is often performing well enough to be president. But in his worst moments, they're scary and cautionary. Can they have him wrest his way through the ability to do the job for 4 years? Based on my anecdotal experience, they cannot. When someday someone reveals the extraordinary stage managing of his daily life and public schedule that Jill has done for 3 years, you will send me an email and express your amazement that 1, I knew, 2, no one leaked this, 3, no one reported it, 4, they let Joe run. Until then, let's hope for the best for America." Now, I live in New York City, and I'm a reporter, and I've been a reporter for a long time. I have plenty of sources, but I'm not the only reporter who could have and should have seen this and had it inform the way they covered the Joe Biden presidency and Joe Biden. I said things like this publicly. I don't think I only was putting in a private email, but it's extraordinary how far from that point of view, based on reporting, not hostility to Joe Biden, not rumors, how far other people's reporting on Joe Biden was from that point of view, that informed point of view about what was happening. And what I lay out in the email is exactly what happened and is now being belatedly reported by others. Huge failure on the part of the media. And the tragedy of it is most reporters who covered the White House for places like the Washington Post and the New York Times knew almost everything I had in that email. Maybe not in 2021, but sitting in the White House, they saw it every day. And yet through some combination of being intimidated by the Biden aides who threatened people who said things like that in public, and a desire to help Donald Trump lose the election to make sure Biden won. They didn't say these things. It did not inform their coverage. Okay? It did inform the coverage of people in conservative media who were mocked and derided as being part of some machine to destroy Joe Biden. I'm going to give you one example. Greg Kelly, who's a friend of mine, anchor at Newsmax. Greg reported this early on, regularly. And if you go back and watch the totality of Greg's coverage, was he occasionally a little bit over the top? Did he occasionally overstate the degree of Joe Biden's mental decline? Without a doubt. But look at some of what Greg reported over a long period of time here. This is number 108.
We have all been watching this, and anybody could see that Joe's in decline. There's no denying that Joe has serious issues. Right now, the people are actually noticing Joe Biden's lack of competence. Take a look at this poll. This is from The People. And CBS News, actually. Biden's actions as president viewed as incompetent, 51%. Take a look at this headline. It goes a little bit further in description. CBS poll, majority of Americans no longer believe Biden is competent. You know who else should quit now? The ultimate him. He's not going to be the Democrat nominee, I can tell you that. I know for sure the Democrat nominee will not be Joe.
Greg's my friend. A lot of people mocked Greg for that coverage, and he's not the only one in conservative media who did it. It shouldn't have taken conservative media. It shouldn't have been confined to conservative media to say the kind of things Greg was saying, both from someone who's an analyst or a commentator, but also from the press. Now, we all know that there was this turning point when the debate happened, and people said, it's shocking. They were shocked by what happened in the debate. I do not understand that point of view. I do not understand how anyone who has C-SPAN could be shocked. Let me give you some examples of why the debate should not have been a revelation. Show you some stuff from the debate, and then I'm going to show you some stuff from earlier in the debate. So here's 106A. This is Joe Biden in the debate, and I'm focusing here on the things that people commented on that shocked them. Look at Joe Biden glassy-eyed while he listens.
Put the baby down, then we decide what to do with it. So he's willing to, as we say, rip the baby out of the womb in the 9th month and kill the baby. Nobody wants that to happen.
Okay, horrible to see. If you're listening on the audio, Joe Biden glassy-eyed. You've all seen it. Here's Joe Biden in 2023.
This is Morgan Sherwin. This is Morgan Sherwin and Sam Cerruti.
Again, if you're listening to the audio only on the podcast version of this program, you're seeing Joe Biden look glassy-eyed. Same thing. Same troubling look. Don't know what's causing it, but it's troubling to see that in a president of the United States. Okay, trailing off. That's another thing people saw in the debate and were troubled by, claimed to be surprised by. Here's from the debate, 106C, Joe Biden trailing off.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. Excuse me, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look.
Okay, troubling, yes. Surprising, no. Could show you 1,000 examples. Here's Joe Biden trailing off before the debate into 2023.
The conduct of the response in the Gaza Strip has been over the top. I think that
Okay, last one. Saying the wrong thing, using the wrong word. Here's Joe Biden, troubling, saying the wrong word in the debate. 106E, please.
If we finally beat Medicare.
Okay. Here's Joe Biden in a pre-debate saying the wrong thing. 106F.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin.
Okay, again, we all say the wrong things. Those are the three. I looked at a lot of the debate coverage after the debate, looked back at my notes of what Democrats said troubled them. Glassy-eyed, trailing off, saying the wrong word. It all happened. It was all on display before the debate. I don't understand how anybody could say the debate surprised them. Now, some people say, well, it was surprising that he did so poorly in such a high-profile moment. Maybe. But it shouldn't be surprised that he exhibited those behaviors. It was at night. He had foolishly had an exhausting schedule leading up to the debate. I don't understand it. I don't understand. And this goes back to my thought when people ask Democrats to this day, reporters ask Democrats on TV, what did you see in private? Didn't you see in private Joe Biden's decline? You didn't need to see it in private. There are vivid examples of in private, and they're interesting for the historical record. And they speak to perhaps the culpability of Biden aides and Democratic officials who saw it in private and didn't do anything, but you didn't need to see it in private. So now we have the Her audio of President Biden's long session with the special counsel looking into his background. And again, those of you who've heard it know it's deeply troubling to listen to him try to answer basic questions with his lawyers having to constantly step in to help him with the facts.
1 month ago died, May 30th, 2015. Was it 2015 he died?
2015.
I think it's 2015.
Or yeah, I'm not sure the months are, but I think it was.
Yeah.
That's right, Mr. President.
And what's happened in the meantime is that Trump gets elected in November of 2017? 2016. All right. So, what do I have 2017 here?
That's when you left office, in January of 2017.
Okay.
Okay, so now comes the question of the president's cancer diagnosis. I'll say again, I feel horrible for the family. I watched them deal with Beau. I attended Beau's funeral, and I saw how torn apart the family was, as any family would be. But to announce that the president has this late-stage cancer with no access, as was true during the presidency, to his doctor, no information about what led up to this, it defies belief. Two things defy belief, truly. One is that he reached this late stage without ever getting a PSA or other tests to try to detect this. The President of the United States gets the best health care in the world. Did he get a PSA test while he was president? It was never in any of the reports they issued after his physicals. So one is, most experts in this field say the president would have known, would have been diagnosed with this long before Friday of last week. And then second, that this happened exactly at the time when the Bidens are looking to change the subject to engender sympathy for Joe Biden with the release of the Her audio and with the new book. What they should do for themselves and for the country and for the public health education of Americans who need more information about prostate cancer, they should make the doctor available. They should put out the full history of Joe Biden being tested for cancer, and particularly for this kind of cancer. I don't think they will, because that's not the Biden style. But we need to understand, as if you're in the media or the Democratic Party or you're a citizen, what just happened and what's happening now. Because what just happened is 4 to 7 years, depending on how you count it, of a cover-up and of a family that put their own ambition and their own belief that they were the only ones who could stop Donald Trump ahead of the reality of Hunter's addiction, the reality of Joe Biden's age, the reality of Joe Biden's loss of mental acuity, the reality of Biden Inc. They took all of that and they said, nope, we're just going to keep going. And if it had not been for the political magic of Nancy Pelosi, I think he would have kept on and been the nominee of the party and devastated the Democratic Party, not just allowing Donald Trump to return to the White House. But I agree with those political analysts, including a lot who had data during the 2024 race, who said he cost them a lot and would have cost them a lot more had he stayed on the ticket. I will say, I'm not an enemy of Joe Biden. I'm not a supporter of Donald Trump. I'm a supporter of a credible, strong, aggressive press corps that reports without fear or favor the truth about everyone in power and holds all powerful interests accountable. And what we're continuing to see this week with the relatively soft coverage and credulous coverage of the Her audio, of the cancer announcement, and of the situation, the storylines around the cover-up. what we're seeing continues to be a Democratic Party and an establishment press corps that pretends their hands are clean, that pretends that they didn't have access to the same information I had access to see clear, and Greg Kelly had access to see so clearly what was happening. And it wasn't just a question of Donald Trump going back to the White House. We had a commander-in-chief who in 2017 I looked at with sadness that he couldn't get through a book interview with a friendly interviewer. That was the commander-in-chief. Now again, Joe and I will discuss this. He had good moments and bad moments. And I do not believe other people were making decisions in the White House. I see no evidence of that. It could be true, but I see no evidence of it. But what I do see evidence of is a press corps and a Democratic Party that believes it can somehow restore its credibility from very low levels without listening to the story that I'm telling you and acknowledging their role in a failure of epic proportions, particularly by the press. All right, take a little bit of a break, and then my conversation with Joe Scarborough is next up. Well, tax day may have already passed, but for millions of Americans, the real trouble, it's only just beginning. If you missed the April 15th deadline or you still owe back taxes, the IRS is ramping up and coming after people with enforcement. Every day you wait only can make things much worse. With over 5,000 new tax liens filed daily and tools like property seizures, bank levies, and wage garnishments, the IRS is applying pressure on individuals all across the country. So, look, increased administrative scrutiny means collections are moving very fast. But the good news is there's still time for Tax Network USA to give you some help. If you're self-employed or a business owner, even if your books are just a mess, they've got it covered. Tax Network USA specializes in clearing up financial chaos to get you back on track fast. Even after the deadline, you can still regain control. Your consultation is always completely free, and acting now could stop penalties, threatening letters, and surprise liens before they escalate. Call 1-800-958-1000, or you can visit tnusa.com/nextup. You may have missed that April 15th deadline, but you haven't run out of options. Let Tax Network USA help you before the IRS makes the next move. Again, call 1-800-958-1000, or you can visit tnusa.com/nextup. Next up, me and Joe Scarborough. Joe and I have had a long conversation over many years about lots of things, including about Joe Biden and about Joe Biden's connection to politics, his mental situation. Often we agree, and sometimes we disagree. So with us now from undisclosed location, my friend Joe. Joe, welcome.
It's great to be here, and congratulations on the podcast, Mark. It's really just taken off.
Thank you, sir. All right, I'm going to put out some premises about where I think we agree,
Okay.
or what we have in common, and you annotate. First of all, the reason why I'm so excited about this conversation, and the reason why I tell people this is unlike any conversation they've heard about a topic discussed ad nauseum for nearly a decade, is because I think you and I are in an unusual, if not unique, position. First of all, we both know Joe Biden pretty well, and we've known him for a long period of time. So we're not dealing with a two-dimensional figure when we talk about him. We're dealing with someone we've spoken to, right?
Right, exactly.
All right. Number two, we both believe that Joe Biden, to this day, has good days and bad days. And so the right-wing caricature that says he's weekend at Bernie's, not in charge of the government when he was president, is not true. And you know from the State of the Union address he gave. But the left-wing defense that, oh, he's perfectly fine, also not true. Then we're open to data on this, correct?
Right, yeah, correct. And I'd love to get into that. I'd love to get into that a little bit more after you go through these initial bullet points. Only because certain skills lend themselves to governing, certain skills still lend themselves to politics and running for president. And there's a strong dividing line there on what he was capable of and not capable of.
We both want to get at the truth. Neither of us has a dog in the hunt where we say, oh, no, I don't want data that conflicts with my view that Biden can't think or Biden is perfect, right?
Right. And just so people know, as you're going through all this, this is literally something that we have talked about, I think, every day since 2019. When one day I would express more concern, one day you would express more concern. And an ongoing debate going into 2020, is he really going to run? Going all the way back and throughout 2022, 23, 24. Yeah, it is just so when you say we've talked about this, this isn't like once every 3 weeks. This has been a running obsession on the state of whether he's going to run, whether he's capable of running.
Right. And most people in the media or commentators, you'd look at them and you'd say, well, that person is dug in on the Biden's fine point of view, or that
Right.
person's dug in the Biden is weakened at Bernie's point of view.
Yeah.
And I can tell everybody from the conversations that you and I have had, we're not in those camps. We're in the let's figure out what's going on school, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you're going to play, I'm sure, the Biden at its best clip in a little bit. That came after I spent 2.5, 3 hours with him. So yeah, so much of it is based on observation. And then of course you see a debate and you're like, well, no, maybe not. So yeah, but you're right though. But it would sort of go back and forth between us over the past 5, 6 years on this.
Right. Now, I'm going to tell my story briefly and my narrative starting in 2017 through the present day. And then I want to hear yours about how you connected to this question. All right. So 2017, I've told this story before. I saw Joe Biden do a book tour event. The moderator was Atul Gawande, a doctor, a very friendly guy. Joe Biden speaking to a big auditorium, and it was a disaster. And it was exactly what we saw later. He was glassy-eyed, had trouble following the conversation. I can't find video of that event anywhere on the internet. I'm a little suspicious about that. Elsewhere, though, on that tour, because I went and looked at the book tour again, 2017, he was fine. Again, good days and bad days. But the bad day that I saw, and it was an evening event, made me worried and say, he's never going to run for anything ever again. He's got a big problem. You didn't see anything till 2019, correct?
Yeah, I will say also, I think in 2017, well, I'll tell you, I had talked about Bo's death on the show, and had talked about extraordinary speech that Bobby Kennedy gave after the death of Martin Luther King. And he talked about the awful grace of God. And I spoke about Bo that way, the awful grace of God, drip by drip, until we understand actually the mercy. And he called me then, and I've thought back on it a good bit. I really do think so. If you're talking about a 2017 book events, so I think those really good and really bad days certainly accelerated after the death of Bo Biden. And I suspect also Hunter this was Mika's operating theory during the campaign, Hunter's conviction, and all of those problems also just, again, had a profound impact on him. I think 2019 was the first time I called you and said, I'm not sure if this guy is going to run. And and I think we agreed on that based on some observations.
Yeah, we both had direct and indirect experiences with him in 2019 that made us think, boy, it just doesn't seem like he's got the focus to do it, because he has some bad days. We also both had the experience that he had plenty of good days. This is an event that got written about by a Wall Street Journal columnist. I wasn't at this event, but once it occurred, I heard from a bunch of people. This is Joe Biden in 2020 as a presidential candidate in South Carolina.
My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. Look me over. If you like what you see, help out. If not, vote for the other guy. Give me a look, though, okay? That's all I've really got to say to you. I got 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. I'm looking at the clock down here.
So he said he's running for Senate, and he said, don't vote for the other Biden. We all know that part of the defense of the pro-Biden people was, oh, he's always had malapropisms. He's always speaking in a certain way. But I looked at that tape and other events in that cycle, the first time he ran. That's a different brain processing than Joe Biden, diarrhea of the mouth.
I think this may be where we disagree. I mean, Joe Biden's always been Joe Biden. Joe Biden's always said crazy things. You go back to the 1987 campaign. You go back to, you go back and you look at what happened in 2007, 2008.
But that's speaking inartfully. Like when he said Barack Obama was clean and articulate. That's artful. That's different. I mean, again, you and I both, public speaking, we're live all the time. We could make a mistake, but you don't look at that video and see the look in his eyes and hear him say, "I'm running for Senate, vote for the other Biden." You don't see that as I did then and do now as part of the decline, or do you?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not. This is a sort of thing. There are a couple of things like this that we agree on so many things. There are a couple of things that we disagree on, and one is the Congresswoman who had passed away that he mentioned that I'm sure we'll be looking at too. Where I look at that as being Joe Biden getting up there, getting flustered, and he's had in his recording, sort of recording in his brain since he was since he was 29. I'm Joe Biden. I'm running for Senate, and I'd love your vote. I think also, Mark, and you mentioned this before, we've both gotten up and spoken. I've unfortunately spent 30 years talking way too much. And there'll be times I will say Mitterrand. Mitterrand and Trump just don't get along, and it'll be like during the break where Alex will get in my ear.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I say Alex will get in my ear and say it's Macron, not Mitterrand. But you think that clip is
this is
telling.
where you make me mental. That clip, to me, there's a through line from that clip to the debate in 2024. He's losing it when he's having a bad night. His brain is not firing. It's not what happens when we say Mitterrand instead of Kohl.
Right.
His brain, that's how I perceive that. Okay.
So let me ask you though, because this happens with other politicians. We've seen other politicians do this before, and this is not whataboutism, but when Donald Trump talked constantly about World War II, and when he talked about all the other crazy things he talked about during the campaign,
mixed up Nancy Pelosi and
Nancy Pelosi and Nancy May,
what's her name?
or whomever.
No, it was Nikki Haley. It was Nikki
Haley. Nikki Haley, exactly.
Yeah.
I think they're both from South Carolina. But yeah, I mean, I've seen that a good bit, especially in older politicians. And I think for me, the question is, does that impact his governing or not? This is the great mystery for me, Mark. And maybe you can help answer this. So you see a through line that through 24. That to me is like bumbling Joe Biden that I've seen for a very long time. But when did you first notice this decline? Do you trace it back to 2017?
That book event I went to 2017, where I turned to my wife after the event and I said, "Thank goodness he'll never run for anything again." And how could his family let him do this book tour? And again, to me, this is why I get so frustrated. As much as we agree about this, to me, it's just obvious through line. What I saw in 2017, what I see in that South Carolina event, what I see when he addresses the dead woman, Congresswoman from Indiana, which we'll play in a second, I see the through line of the bad days are increasing, and the bad days, you wouldn't want a CEO or a president having a bad day at a time of crisis. Let's play. You and I have thought about this a million times. 104, Joe Biden at an event in part honoring a dead Congresswoman from Indiana talks to her.
Because I believe we can use these advances to do even more to make America stronger and a healthier nation. And so many of you know so much about this as well, and you're committed. And I want to thank all of you here for including bipartisan elected officials like Representative Governor, Senator Braun, Senator Booker, Representative Jackie. Are you here? Where's Jackie? I didn't think she was going to be here to help make this a reality.
Again, you and I have talked about this so much. I know you think I over-rely on the example, but that is not Mitterrand or saying Mitterrand instead of Kohl. That is talking to a dead person the event was on her behalf. How can that not be like a signature signal moment where the country and the media said there's a big problem?
Yeah, I mean, that's a concern, and it was reported on, I'm sure. So what would you have at that point? Do you pull up the stakes and say because he did that, get out of the race?
It's up to him. But it was asked about at the White House briefing, and the White House press secretary said the reason Joe Biden talked to a dead congresswoman was because it was top of mind for him. She was top of mind. Again, this is not a joke, and it's not about the 2024 election. It's about the commander in chief. We had no access to his doctor. And again, you want to bring up Donald Trump confusing people, it's fine. But right now we're talking about Joe Biden. I just look at that and say, like, if that were my dad, in a public role, and he started drinking with a dead congresswoman, I would take him for some emergency tests. I just don't understand how you look at that and have a reaction of, confused.
I think that maybe the reason I look at it that way is because, again, everything is context, and you say, oh, well, don't bring up Donald Trump. That's in context and what was also going on at the same time. The people whose heads were blowing up about Joe Biden were completely fine with Donald Trump. I think the other thing, though, my personal context on it is that, I don't know exactly when that was, but I'm sure I had talked to him. I'm sure I'd been in the White House. I'm sure
That was
what
2023.
2023. I mean, there was an ongoing conversation either between myself and the president, myself and people around him. And I think if I had ever had a conversation with him, where I had that concern, then that would have been far more telling to me. But again, though, yeah, no doubt, that's a bad day at the office, no doubt about it.
All right. Again, I'll say respectfully, to me, it's worse than a bad day in an office. It's just seminal. All right. Let's talk about you and your famous argument in 2024 before the debate about saying best Biden ever. This gets a lot of attention. I want to walk through it carefully. Set up the context of this. You mentioned on your show in the soundbite that you'd met with Biden, but just talk a little bit more about the meeting.
Well, and again, it's not just that meeting. I remember writing an op-ed in the Washington Post.
The wider context of your contact with him.
Yeah, the wider context. And I remember early on, no, actually, it wasn't Afghanistan, it was Ukraine. And I wrote a Washington Post op-ed that said, Joe Biden needs to stop telling Vladimir Putin what he's not going to do. Joe Biden needs to start telling, Vladimir Putin what he is going to do, or just keep his mouth shut, basically. And went through all the reasons why being overly cautious on the issue of Ukraine was not serving our interests, because we needed to keep Putin guessing a bit more than that. Got a call late at night. As you know, Meek and I go to sleep pretty early because of our early wake-up call. Got a call late at night. And there's about a 30-45 minute pretty one-sided discussion from the President of the United States, being critical, but more importantly, going in depth as to why he was doing what he was doing and taking me through it. And, Mark, you and I have talked to politicians, and I think this is a very important point for people that are listening and maybe skeptical, but maybe open-minded about this. You and I have talked to a lot of politicians, and I'm going to be really blunt. Most politicians that call up and lecture me or lecture you about something we've written or said, we sit there and we're very polite, but rolling our eyes because, they're usually going, they're talking, they're doing their talking points. And again, you're in an interesting position. I'm not going to debate a presidential candidate or a politician when they're calling me up complaining about something that I've done on the air. I go, thank you very much. I appreciate your input. But usually I hang up the phone and Meek will be, who's that? And I'll be like, oh, that was fill in the blank. Oh my God. On his talking points. It was pretty embarrassing. I didn't get that with Biden. In fact, when I finished talking to Biden on I guess it was late 22, I hung up the phone and I said to Meek, I go, he doesn't have dementia. Whoa. Because again, it was not just cogent. It was a better, really, analysis of the situation than I'd heard from most people, unless it was, let's say, it was Chairman McCall or somebody running a pertinent committee.
And you're confident if someone heard the audio of that conversation, they would come away with the same conclusion.
Oh my God, yeah. Anybody.
Yeah.
And then there were other calls there. Also, it's not a secret. Mike Barnacle is a good friend of ours, and friend of Joe Biden's and talked to him regularly, probably weekly. I'd always talk to Mike. And again, there's no grand conspiracy. I'd say, how's he doing? How's his energy level? How's his, did he seem cogent? Did he seem off? Because you're reading the reports in the paper. And again, and there were about 5 people like that we were, and I would talk to you about this too. If somebody had a concern, I would call you up and said, hey, I've got so-and-so saw him in the White House and was concerned. So that there were a lot of those meetings. There also, though, was, again, this 2.5, 3-hour meeting that I had with him. I think it was March, may have been March of 2024.
Yeah.
And we went in, it was supposed to be like an hour lunch, which is not unusual. I've done it with Donald Trump and been in with Barack Obama. We go in, pretty regularly. But when I had him there, I wasn't asking him about the campaign. I was asking him about Ukraine. I was asking about Israel. I was asking about India, which I think was in the news recently. Basically took him around the world. I asked him about, our flex in Asia, what was going on in Guam, what was going on in Philippines, what was going on with Australia, what was going on in South Korea and Japan talking. And he really took me around the world. And I will say, if you and I lined up 100 Washington politicians, he handled those answers better than 99% of them. Ironically, this will be a surprise to people. Ironically, the one person that I talked to in the 2024 cycle who had as impressive a grasp was Ron DeSantis, who for some reason didn't want to show that during the campaign, but talked to Ron DeSantis several times on foreign policy. And he was one of these guys that I talked to, go, wow, okay. So I went away from a 3-hour meeting with Biden talking about everything from, Bill Burns negotiating, in Russia. Is he going to negotiate in Russia? And talking about the West Bank and what he was doing as far as illegal settlements in the West Bank, how in relationship with Netanyahu. And I went away from there feeling extraordinarily confident. The guy was cogent and and beyond cogent, that he actually, more than, again, except for maybe chairmen or chairwomen of the relevant committees on Capitol Hill, a better grasp on foreign policy than most anybody.
All right. So here's now what you said in the wake of that meeting. This is 105, please, on Morning Joe.
As I've said here on the show over the past couple weeks, I've spent a good bit of time with Joe Biden. I've spent a couple of hours with Joe Biden, sitting, talking, going around the world as far as talking issues, talking the economy, talking inflation. He's cogent. But I undersold him when I said he was cogent. He's far beyond cogent. In fact, I think he's better than he's ever been. Intellectually, analytically, because he's been around for 50 years. And, I don't know if people know this or not, Biden used to be a hothead. Sometimes that Irishman would get in front of the reasoning. Sometimes he would say things he didn't want to say. This is, and I don't really, I don't really care. Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever.
Okay. So a lot to unpack there.
Mark, you have to explain to everybody, that's actually the first time I've seen the clip all the way through. And you were the one, 6 months later to alert me to the fact that this had gone viral.
Yeah, well, as I told you, and people may not realize, you don't pay much attention to social media anymore. You don't pay much attention to criticism. But I told you for several months, I said, Joe, best Biden ever has become the symbol for the right of the media and MSNBC having so much Trump derangement syndrome that you're claiming that a guy who's clearly lost mental acuity is the best Biden ever. Now, I say to people, go watch the State of the Union address. Talk to people who talk to Joe Biden. He had good days and bad days. You were with him on a good day. and had conversations with him on a good day. But
On good days,
good days,
plural.
good days.
Yeah.
Looking back at that, do you say, well, it was misleading to say Best Biden ever without caveating it and say, except on the days when he's not the best Biden ever?
Well, but I never saw those days personally.
Well, you did because you saw him address a dead congresswoman, and you saw him in South Carolina.
The
and you
dead
heard
congresswoman, yeah.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
more than that. I mean, I can show you. I can show you the RNC clip reels. There were plenty of days in public when he was not the best Biden ever, and of course, shortly after,
he stumbled and bumbled around. Mark, I mean, yeah, he certainly did. Donald Trump did. Other politicians did. But it's actually the same case as a lot of times when I've gone in and talked to Donald Trump. We go on to Donald Trump, and I've heard the media narrative around Donald Trump, and certainly I've been very critical of Donald Trump. And when I leave, I have a better understanding, just like Jeffrey Goldberg did a couple of weeks ago, I have a better understanding of where Donald Trump is mentally. If Donald Trump is losing it, like people have said through the years or not. And so again, am I going to look at a clip that's gone viral and pay more attention to that than 2.5, 3 hours I had with a guy one-on-one going around the world? No, I'm just not going to. Are some of the clips bad? Yeah, they certainly are bad. I can understand why people would see that without the context and say that there was a problem with that, especially because I said start rolling your tape right here. It's like but when I look at that tape, based on what I saw with Biden, based on the time that I spent with Biden, based on the hundreds of hours that I talked to people who talked to Biden and people that worked with Biden, and were with him day in and day out, good friends that I know that I trusted before Biden was president, that I trust now that Biden's not president. I mean, put in the proper context, I'm just not going to freak out and melt down on one or two clips here or there. And again, he bumbled around and he stumbled around, but he has for quite some time. That didn't seem to me to get in the way of Joe Biden being able to analyze the most important issues. And I certainly think he has a better grasp on it than probably the overwhelming majority of his critics, or certainly did when I spoke with him. But again, the question is, who is somebody else running the government for him? Is he incapable of running meetings? I've never talked to anybody that has said Joe Biden's not capable of running meetings. The complaint that I've heard, not only from, and I hope people are still listening to me because it is important. The only complaints I've heard about Biden internally was that he was angry. He would often get angry, and that it was basically his way or the highway. He would listen to other people, but the Afghanistan issue is a perfect example. He had everybody from Mark Milley, every general, everybody saying, don't get out of Afghanistan. But it was, I think at times it would have been good for him to yield a little bit more to some of his advisors than he did. That's one thing. The second thing is, again, this is multi-layered. I talked to a good friend that I had in the French delegation when they had tough negotiations. I think it was right after the state dinner, the French state dinner, before the state dinner. And they said they were all surprised. They were up 5 or 6 points, and not only was Biden on top of his game, he was, they thought, a bit aggressive. Again, put into context, and I'm curious, let me ask you, do you think that Joe Biden day to day was incapable of running the government?
I think he had good moments and bad moments, and at his bad moments, no one would want him to be commander in chief or to make decisions, but his team was very skilled at having him make decisions during good moments. And I think he had plenty of good moments, including with you. But this is why I'm offering you to revise and extend your best Biden ever remarks, which right now are, cited more than anything else, which is, you could say, when I was with him, he was as good as he's been. He was better than other, politicians, but he wasn't during press conferences. He wasn't during serious interviews.
No.
He had moments in public, which I could show you many of, where clearly he was having bad moments, worse than Joe Biden pre-2017. So do you want to revise and extend anything in that clip to say, when I saw him best Biden ever, as opposed to suggesting you were impervious to all the other data suggesting.
No, I'm not impervious to all the other data, just as you aren't impervious to all other data. As you said off the top, we don't. I don't think either of us land where the toughest Biden critics land, saying that the guy was a drooling idiot and was incapable of running the country. We also don't and have never agreed that the guy was perfect and that he didn't have better days and worse days. So no,
Do you cringe watching that clip?
no, I don't at all. I'm sorry. I guess I should be, but I see. I haven't seen the meme for the past year or so. When I see that clip, I see again. I see myself doing what any reporter would do, doing what any news host would do. You go into the White House and you talk to the President of the United States for 2.5, 3 hours, and you're talking hard policy. You're not talking about football or whatever else. You're talking policy.
Right.
And the guy, no, hold on. The guy's the guy handled himself better than again. I would guess 99% of those that are criticizing him right now would have, and certainly in March of 2024. And so I see that. I mean, do I? I mean, I guess my revising and extending of those remarks came the morning after the debate, when I was the first person to say he needed to get out of the race.
Right. All right. Hold on. I want to get to the debate in a second, but I just want to clean up two things that you mentioned that I know from you that I think people misunderstand about you regarding the White House and Joe Biden,
Right.
the president's general. One is people tell me, oh, Joe went to Mar-a-Lago to see Trump because he loves access. He went to the White House to see Biden. He loves access. That you crave the access to presidents, and therefore you're soft on presidents in general.
Right.
What's your response to that?
Well, what's your response to that? You know me.
You don't need the access. You do it because it's important for your job, but you'd be happy staying home. I know almost everyone we know craves access to presidents more than you do.
Right.
It's the exact opposite in my experience of what people say.
It's the exact fucking opposite,
Yeah.
which is what's so funny. When I see people either projecting or confessing, oh,
Yeah.
Joe did this because he wants access, or oh, Joe did this because he's a defender. That's confession.
Yeah.
When the White House calls me, and you know this, and Mika knows this, when the White House calls me and says, the president would like you to come up and talk to him on such and such a date, I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, that's what you say, and you mean
I do, and I mean it. I'm like, this means I'm going to have to leave my kids. It means I'm going to have to get on a plane. This means I'm going to have to go to Washington. This means I'm going to have to sit there and put up with the bullshit of getting in to see the president. It means I'm going to have to comment, hey, Mr. President, such a great honor. And then I'm going to have to sit there and listen. I'm not, it's so funny. You and I both get raked over the coals in 2016 after Donald Trump got elected, and we talked to Donald Trump. And I had the shittiest little, well, you had columns written about you, but I have these shitty little articles written by people in the Washington Post. Again,
Yes.
And they would call me up and they would go, it must be really amazing to have a guy that's president that is talking to you. I'm like, that's happened since I was 31 years old. Well, it must be amazing to go in the White House. It's happened since I was 31. Well, Mika must love it. I said, Mika's been going to the White House since she was 9. I mean, listen, there is no doubt. There are things that excite me. There are things that make me sweat nervously. There are things that I'm like, I can't believe I'm doing this. But those things would be meeting Paul McCartney. Those things, I'm serious. I won't mention it. I won't mention his name, but I met a guy that I've seen in movies and some of my favorite series. Really nice guy. He was really nice to me. I started sweating. I get nervous, which is funny. There are things like athletes, there are, if I meet athletes that I really look up to and respect, I will sit and go, oh my God, presidents, Presidents, no. And so people that are going, Joe wants the access, they're only saying that because they want the access. I don't need the access. I get paid to say what I think, whether they like it or not.
Right. And I'll say, because we're both Beatles fans, you never have said you're bigger than Jesus. But the reality is your show, since the show's been on for many, many years, makes you in some ways bigger than the president. You don't need to say that. I can say it. The presidents want to see you. You're happy to see them because it's part of your job, but you are not lusting for access to any president you've ever covered. And the second thing I want to dispel is this notion that you're a Biden defender, that you're saying best Biden ever, or your coverage of Biden in this presidential cycle was a manifestation of your desire to defend him. How would you address that?
I just, again, I'm not on prime time on any cable news network. Like, people tune into my show to hear what I think. And if I get it right more than I get it wrong, then I do well and I get my contract renewed. I've never, and I don't say this with any animosity in my heart, and I don't judge them for feeling this way. But George W. Bush, I had a good friend who was a governor inviting me to an event in a state, and the Bush team said, "Your state's not big enough for George W. Bush and Joe Scarborough to be in." Like, yeah, there are other things I can pep for that I really admire George W. Bush about. I tried to interview him on things. Doesn't like me. I'm totally fine with that. I understand. I mean, the presidency, he's a tough job, and having some guy, shooting his mouth off for 3 or 4 hours every day about what you do, I can understand how that would get under people's skin. Just like, guys up in a booth, talking about some of the greatest athletes and the mistakes they're making. So same thing with Barack Obama, same thing with Donald Trump, though my relationship with President Trump's been a bit more up and down through the years. And
But you're
the
not
same
you're
thing-
not a
by the
defender.
way,
That's the
by the
point.
way, I've got to say the same thing with Joe Biden. If I wanted to be a defender of Joe Biden, I would have remained a defender of Joe Biden. I haven't talked to Joe Biden since I said he needed to get out of the race. It's like it was, but again, me defending, I understand some people in some media spheres need to defend the party, need to defend the flag, need to defend whatever they need to defend. I just have no need. Because that's not why I get paid. I get paid for speaking my mind. And if people say, "Oh, well, why didn't you attack Biden more?" I did on Afghanistan. I did on the southern border. I did on the Penn swimmer. I did on all of these other things. It's just like I am really blessed. When I got elected to Congress at a very young age, I got elected despite the fact that Newt Gingrich and the Republican Party campaigned hard against me, and they did that because they thought I was too conservative to get elected in my district. I won, and it liberated me. So the rest of my the rest of my political career, I got to say whatever I wanted to say without any fear of blowback. And it's the same thing that's happened at MSNBC. Despite the fact, obviously, prime time is progressive, I've gotten to say whatever I've wanted to say. Phil Griffin called me up one day, the first week I was on Morning Joe 18 years ago, and I had a suggestion. And I said, "I love you, Phil, but, you want to do the show, you can do the show, but I'm here for 3 hours, so I'm going to do it the way I want to do it."
Phil ran MSNBC. All right, let's get back to the issue of Brian's acuity. I contend that anyone who is surprised by the debate performance, anyone for whom Biden's debate performance altered their view, wasn't paying attention. What happened in the debate that caused you to alter your view?
Everybody I know that knew Biden, that talked to Biden regularly, was shocked. Now, there's a big asterisk here. There's a big caveat here. So I had a ton of contacts in Biden world, but I wasn't on the inner circle. I wasn't, I didn't talk to Jill Biden. I didn't talk to Steve Ricchetti. I didn't talk to Mike Donlin, and I didn't talk to Annie Tomasini. And those were the 4 people that were the innermost sanctum. Didn't talk to them. I spent a lot of time talking to the chief of staff, and talking to Anita Dunn, talking to John Meacham, talking to other people around the president. And I would tell you in real time, Mike Barnacle, John Meacham, I called John Meacham actually 5 minutes before the debate. And I said, what are you hearing? How's he doing? He goes, well, the old man's sounding good. His voice is a little hoarse, but he's sounding okay. And that was 5 minutes before. I called him 5 minutes after. It's like, John, what in the world? And same with Barnacle and everybody else. So again, I don't know that they weren't paying attention. That's your take. I think people that were close to him, that saw him day in and day out, night in and night out, were shocked. That doesn't speak to the inner circle. I don't know. Maybe Donlin, Ricchetti, and Jill Biden saw something the rest of us didn't see day in and day out.
I'm going to tell you a story now. It's about a guy named Leo Grillo. Leo was on a road trip and he came across a dog. It was a Doberman, and the Doberman was in pretty bad shape, severely underweight, clearly in trouble. Leo rescued that Doberman and he named him Delta. Sadly, Delta was just one of many animals that needed help, which inspired Leo to do something. He started Delta Rescue. It's the largest no-kill, care-for-life animal sanctuary in the entire world. They've rescued thousands of dogs and cats and horses from the wilderness, and they provide all those animals with shelter, love, safety, and a good home. That is dedication and everlasting love to animals, which you can be a part of. It was Leo's mission and legacy, and it can be yours as well. Delta Rescue relies solely on contributions from people like all of us. If you want caring for these animals to be a part of your legacy, speak with your estate planner, because there are tax savings and estate planning benefits too. You can grow your estate while letting your love for animals live well into the future. Check out the estate planning tab on their website to learn more, and you can speak to an advisor there. We call a dog man's best friends for a good reason. You can help all those who need help the very most by visiting deltarescue.org today to learn more. Again, that's deltarescue.org.
What were the things the White House did to shield coverage of his decline that you would point to say that wasn't right what they did?
I think the biggest mistake they made was sort of the first mistake, which was and something that Mike Barnacle was saying from the first days of the administration, which was they're blocking him in there. They need to let him get out. They need to let him talk more. They need to stop protecting him so much. There was real concern among many people that knew Biden that Ron Klain ran too tight of a ship. That Joe Biden needed to get out there. If he stumbled and he bumbled, if he made mistakes on the campaign trail, as Donald Trump has, as George W. Bush did, as the first Bush did, and I'm not comparing all of their mental acuity. I'm just saying, you get the American people used to it, and then they can decide. It's kind of like Donald Trump, where Americans understood going into the election that there were many things about Donald Trump that they may not have liked, but they discounted those things because they saw him enough that they knew him. I think the biggest mistake is that they didn't let Biden out and let him hold press conferences, let him make those mistakes, have him stumble through it, if he had to stumble through it, so the American people could decide, okay, what I eventually came to, and that what this conversation's been about, where they said, okay, yeah, he stumbles, he looks glassy-eyed, but I like his position here, or I like his position there. He really seems to know what he's talking about when he's talking about Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, but they didn't do that. And I think one of the biggest tells that they really didn't trust him to get out and say things was when he didn't do the Super Bowl interview, which was, again, deeply deeply concerning. And the feeling again among people that knew Biden for 20, 30, 40 years was there was a mistake on the White House's part. They should have had him do it. If he screwed up, he screwed up.
This is where you and I couldn't disagree more. If they had put him out more, he would have destroyed his reputation. Maybe it would have been good for the party because he would have been off the ticket sooner. But if he'd gone out more, it would have been a disaster. They did not let him do interviews.
Let me ask you this question: How do you and this is not a leading question or a rhetorical question.
Yes,
how
Counselor.
do you know this? And I don't.
That if they put him out more, he would have screwed up?
You said if they put him out more, it would have been a disaster. How do you know that? And I don't.
Well,
based on
good
what
question.
sources?
So I base it on three things. I base it, number one, on the fact that they didn't put him out and he wanted to be out and he's the president. So if he really wanted to be out and he had a good case to be out more, he would have been. Number two, I spoke to many members of Congress and donors and advisors who spent time with him, who saw in private what was on offer in public too, but saw in circumstances where he was exhibiting signs of mental decline that made them understand why they didn't put him out. And there's no ambiguity. And these are vivid descriptions of it. And finally, when they did put him out, and make no mistake, they knew what the stakes of the debate were. They knew. And he could not rise to that occasion. He couldn't. And he failed cataclysmically. But that failure to me was not the least bit surprising because he couldn't do an interview with the New York Times or the Washington Post, first president in memory not to do those things. He couldn't hold regular press conferences. He couldn't have events, like with a rigorous schedule. These are things that if you look at why they did the debate because they needed something to turn the dynamic around. Mm-hmm. The alternative was go campaign, do 5 events a day, do an interview and explain yourself. He couldn't do those things because if he could have, he would have. He was not blocked by the staff. He was blocked by reality. That's how I know.
Okay.
Well, you must have talked to donors as I did who were stunned that he showed up in their house with a teleprompter in a Park Avenue fundraiser for 15 people and couldn't make small talk with people he'd known for 50 years.
I thought it was interesting that Olivia Nuzzi's last article where she got attacked for trying to help RFK Jr. actually was the first thing that I had read that actually lined up with some things that I had heard from donors, that he was particularly bad at night at fundraisers after a very long day, that at that point he was just completely exhausted and just mentally burned out. It's interesting. I brought that up to somebody that worked with him throughout the campaign, and they said, well, I'd rather have him at 8 o'clock at night than 8 o'clock in the morning. So, so
just tell me
again, though, but I will just say, just generally though, if you can't hold the press conferences, if you can't do all those other things, then you can't be president of the United States. And if you're saying they didn't put him out there because he was incapable of being out there, well, I mean, I don't know what to say to that other than you brought
up the best example, the Super Bowl. Yeah.
I mean,
who turns down the Super Bowl interview?
I think again, I would definitely be speaking with you from a different vantage point if the times I had seen him were, if there was bumbling, stumbling, halting Joe Biden. I mean, he's old. He was slow. He walked stiffly. He moved very slowly. But I just never saw any of that personally. And I suspect that if you had spent the time that I spent with him and had the interactions that I had with him, you probably wouldn't be asking these questions right now, which are all very good questions. I think that, and I think other people would feel the same way. And so one of the reasons why I have the question of why didn't they let him out more was because when I talked to him, I walked away thinking, okay, well,
Good days and bad days. Two more topics if we can. First, what's your critique of how the New York Times, the Washington Post, etc., NBC News covered Joe Biden's loss of mental acuity? Did they do a great job, a horrible job? What's your critique?
I mean, I don't know. I think the idea that there's some like grand conspiracy among the media, which people have said to hide Joe Biden's mental decline, sort of laughable, because I know people that write for the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal, and they're all hyper competitive. I see people competing with each other, and I don't know well, I don't believe there is a conspiracy among those mainstream media outlets that you talk about, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, et cetera, to do that. I will say, and I would love for you to talk about this, in June, I think I read today, it was June the 4th, 2024, the Wall Street Journal tried to blow the lid off of this story. And in fact, the Wall Street Journal editorial page wrote about it, I think, this morning. They tried to blow the lid off of this story. And they came up with a story where their best source was Kevin McCarthy mischaracterizing a meeting that he had in the White House with Joe Biden on the day that he walked out of the White House, saying, basically, that was Biden at his best. I want to talk to Joe Biden every day, et cetera, et cetera. But I want to underline this point because this is the bullshit. This is sort of the reframing of history, right? It's kind of like everybody was against the Iraq War. After the Iraq War went south, you go back and you look and you see more people voted for the Iraq War, the second Iraq War, than they voted for the first Iraq War. Everybody's not going to go, oh, the Wall Street Journal had it right and everybody else had it wrong. Mark, you and I read the Wall Street Journal, and by the way, I love the editor. I think what she's doing, what Emma Tucker's doing at the Wall Street Journal is extraordinary. And I told her as much, but it's also, I read that article and I was like, what's this article about? They're quoting the best quotes they have are from Kevin McCarthy, who actually is contradicting himself, and then Mike Johnson's staff. So I think I bring that up because when people talk about this like media conspiracy, in June of 2024, the Wall Street Journal tried to get the story.
And failed.
And they came up short.
Largely failed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were they right? They were right. They were right for the wrong reason, though, because, I mean, if you could share your thoughts about that story.
I agree. They did better than most, but that story was so far away from revealing the truth that it's misleading when people say, oh, the Wall Street Journal, they were heroes for getting it done. They really came up short. I mean, I wouldn't have published that story as they published it.
Well, and when I read it, I wasn't critical of the reporters.
No.
I was wondering why the editors allowed that story to go out, because it was, again, the conclusion was right. The reporting was, and the sources, let me say the sources, not the reporting.
Yeah.
The sources were terrible. And that, again, they contradicted things they had said on video in real time when they were coming out of their White House meetings, talking about how Joe Biden was, in command, and they were going to talk to him every day because he really knew what he was talking about. And again, that's why I think, again, this sort of selective amnesia is again, it does remind me a lot of the Iraq War and the selective amnesia after things went badly there. I mean, yeah, there are many clips of Joe Biden stumbling around and looking like he's completely out of it. No doubt about it. I'm only talking about what I saw with my eyes. I'm only talking about what I did on my reporting, and that's the conclusions I came to.
You and I agree. He had good days and bad days. You and I agree. The critics on both sides overstated the case. And we disagree on whether the things he did in public before the debate were dispositive in saying he had too many bad days to be able to continue. That's where we disagree. Joe, very grateful that you are best Joe ever, or best Scarborough.
I am
ever.
best Joe ever.
Yeah.
Even though I'm stumbling around because I'm a little exhausted.
Yes. Very grateful to you. Thank you for the conversation.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. All right. That's it for Next Up. Thank you for watching. Next episode, we have two great guests. Megan Kelly will be here and Tom Cotton, the gentleman from Arkansas. We will see you then on Next Up.